The orientation hall of Station Helios 9 hummed with the nervous energy of 200 recruits who had no idea what they were walking into. Commander Vex stood at the podium, his four eyes scanning the assembled crowd with the kind of patience that comes from watching 1,000 classes of overconfident youngsters think they understand warfare. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," Vex began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into something vaguely comprehensible. "You are here because your species has been deemed capable of contributing to our collective security." Notice I said capable, not qualified. A ripple of uncertain laughter spread through the hall. Finn sat near the back, slouched in a chair designed for beings with entirely different skeletal structures. He was picking at a protein bar that tasted like cardboard mixed with regret. "Over the next 6 cycles, you will be tested, trained, and quite possibly traumatized." Vex continued with what might have been a smile on his triple-jointed face. "Your first course begins today. Weapons Engineering with Master Cal. I suggest you pay attention. Last year, 3 students accidentally vaporized themselves. We had to send their species very apologetic letters." Finn perked up at that. This might actually be interesting. The recruits filed into the engineering bay, a massive space filled with workstations, tool racks, and what appeared to be blast shields. Lots of blast shields. That was either very reassuring or deeply concerning, and Finn honestly could not tell which. Master Cal entered like a storm given physical form. He was built like a tank, if tanks had 6 limbs and skin that looked like volcanic rock. His species, the Hurlon, were known throughout the galaxy for 2 things: exceptional weaponsmithing and absolutely zero sense of humor. "Sit," Cal barked. Everyone sat. "You are here to learn the sacred art of creating instruments of destruction. Not toys, not decorations, weapons that will keep our alliance alive when the Void Dwellers come scratching at our doors." He slammed a massive fist onto a workbench, and the entire thing buckled. Nobody laughed. Finn stopped chewing his protein bar. "Your first assignment is simple," Cal announced, pulling up a holographic display. "You will construct a ranged weapon using only materials from the basic supply depot. No advanced fabricators, no energy cores, no graviton manipulators. You will work with metal, polymer, and whatever primitive understanding of physics your species has managed to stumble upon." A Yulari student named Talix raised one of his delicate crystalline appendages. The Yulari were known for being the sophisticates of the galaxy, all elegant architecture and refined culture. "Master Cal, when you say basic materials, surely you mean we can still utilize electromagnetic field theory and plasma containment." Cal's eyes narrowed. "Did I stutter? Basic. Materials. If your ancestors could not have made it with fire and rocks, you are overthinking it." Talix looked personally offended by the concept of fire and rocks. Across the room, Brock stood up without being called on. The Draxan were not big on protocol. They were big on violence, honor, and loudly announcing their intentions. "This is a warrior's test. We shall forge weapons worthy of our bloodlines." "Sit down before I use you as a demonstration of blunt force trauma," Cal replied without missing a beat. Brock sat down. Even Draxan warriors knew when they were outmatched. Cal's gaze swept across the room and landed on the small cluster of humans sitting together near the left side. Finn could feel the weight of that stare. Humans were the newcomers, the latest species to join the Alliance. Most of the galaxy still thought of them as the awkward kids who showed up late to the party and immediately started doing weird things. "And you," Cal said, pointing directly at Finn. "Human. What do you know about weapons?" Finn swallowed the last of his terrible protein bar. Well, sir, humans have been making weapons for a pretty long time. We got pretty creative about it, actually. Creative, Cal repeated, as if the word tasted bad. Warfare is not about creativity. It is about efficiency, power, and reliability. Do you understand? Sure, Finn said, though his tone suggested he absolutely did not agree, but was smart enough not to argue with a guy who could bench press a shuttle. Cal grunted. We shall see. You have 3 days. Your weapons will be tested against live targets. The student who designs the most effective weapon will be fast-tracked to the Elite Combat Engineering Division. The rest of you will spend an additional cycle in remedial classes, learning why your terrible ideas failed. He gestured toward the supply depot doors. Materials are available now. Choose wisely. Dismissed. The stampede toward the depot was immediate and chaotic. Talix glided toward the advanced polymer section with the grace of someone who had never experienced a clumsy moment in his life. Broke shouldered his way toward the metal ingots, already planning something that probably involved hitting things very hard. Finn wandered toward the depot with his hands in his pockets, looking around with the casual interest of someone browsing a market rather than preparing for a graded assignment. He passed by the plasma conduits, ignored the magnetic accelerator components, and walked right past the gravity modulation units that had other students practically drooling. Instead, he stopped in front of a bin marked Recycled Materials Non-Critical. An instructor assistant, a tiny floating drone with a judgmental attitude, hovered nearby. That is the discard bin, human. You want the fabrication materials 3 aisles over. Nah, this is perfect, Finn said, pulling out a length of elastic polymer that had probably been part of a cargo restraint system. He tested it between his hands, stretching it, experimentally. Yeah, this'll work. The drone's optical sensor zoomed in and out, the mechanical equivalent of blinking in confusion. You are selecting garbage. One person's garbage is another person's weapons platform, Finn replied cheerfully. He grabbed a small rectangular piece of leather padding, probably from old equipment straps, and then found a Y-shaped piece of metal tubing that looked like it had been cut off from a broken chair frame. I am filing a report that suggests humans may need psychological evaluation before being cleared for weapons training, the drone announced. You do that, buddy, Finn said, carrying his materials back to his workstation. By the time he returned, the workshop was alive with activity. Talix had spread out precision tools and was already sketching elegant equations on his holographic display. Brock was heating metal in a portable forge, his face set in a mask of absolute concentration. Other students from a dozen different species were measuring, cutting, welding, and occasionally setting small things on fire by accident. Finn laid out his 3 components on his workstation: the elastic polymer strips, the leather pad, and the Y-shaped metal piece. He sat down, pulled out a basic cutting tool, and got to work. Cal made his rounds through the workshop, observing each student's progress with the critical eye of someone who had seen every possible mistake at least 5 times. He stopped at Talix's station and nodded approvingly at the complex plasma containment framework taking shape. He paused at Broke's station, watching the Draxon carefully layer different metal alloys. Adequate. Do not burn yourself. A warrior does not fear fire, Brock announced. A smart warrior avoids unnecessary trips to the medical bay, Cal countered, moving on. When he reached Finn's station, he stopped completely. His expression went through several phases: confusion, disbelief, and what might have been the early stages of an aneurysm. "What?" Cal said slowly. "Are you making?" Finn looked up from where he was carefully attaching the elastic strips to the two upper prongs of the Y-shaped metal. "A ranged weapon, sir. Like you assigned." "That looks like a child's toy." "Well, yeah, kind of," Finn admitted. "But it's also effective, cheap to make, and requires almost no maintenance. Plus, the ammunition is literally anything small and aerodynamic that I can pick up off the ground." Cal's face did something complicated. "You are taking this seriously, correct? This assignment determines your placement in advanced classes." "Oh, totally serious," Finn assured him, testing the tension on the elastic. "This bad boy has been dropping game animals and annoying people for thousands of years back on Earth. Low-tech does not mean ineffective, sir." Cal stared at him for a long moment, then at the contraption, then back at Finn. "If this fails spectacularly during testing, I will personally assign you to latrine maintenance for the rest of your academy career." "That's fair," Finn said. Cal walked away, muttering something in his native language that the translators diplomatically refused to interpret. The next 3 days passed in a blur of construction, testing, and modifications. The workshop smelled like ozone, heated metal, and the distinctive odor of burning plastic that someone quickly learned was a bad idea. Students worked late into the night cycles, determined to create something impressive. Finn finished his project on the second day. He spent the third day practicing. Day 2 of construction brought a parade of increasingly complex weapons into existence. The workshop looked like a mad scientist's fever dream if the scientist had access to alien technology and absolutely no adult supervision. Talek stood before his creation like a proud parent at a graduation ceremony. His plasma caster gleamed under the overhead lights, all smooth curves and elegant energy channeling systems. The weapon hummed with potential power, its containment field glowing a soft blue that practically screamed expensive and sophisticated. "Beautiful, is it not?" Talek asked anyone within earshot. "The plasma reaches temperatures of 12,000 degrees, and the targeting algorithm I programmed can track moving objects with 0.03% deviation. It is, quite frankly, a masterpiece." "It is also the size of a supply crate," observed a nearby student from the insectoid species. "How do you plan to carry it?" Talek waved a dismissive appendage. "Combat engineering is about results, not portability." Across the room, Brock had taken a completely different approach. His magnetic rail launcher looked like someone had strapped accelerator coils to a piece of industrial equipment and called it a day, which, to be fair, was exactly what he had done. The Draxan warrior had reinforced the barrel with triple-layered alloys and added a shoulder stock that could probably double as a blunt weapon. "Kinetic force," Brock announced to nobody in particular, test-firing his weapon into the shielded range at the back of the workshop. The projectile hit the barrier with a sound like a gong being struck by a meteor. "This will punch through armor plating, through walls, through enemies foolish enough to stand in groups. It will also dislocate your shoulder if you are not careful with the recoil," Cal noted, walking past. "But the concept is sound. Violent, but sound." Other students had created variations on similar themes. Energy weapons, projectile accelerators, even one ambitious attempt at a mini rocket launcher that had been quickly shut down after the safety inspector had what could only be described as a panic attack. And then there was Finn, sitting at his workstation with what looked like a child's toy from a primitive amusement park. The human had attached the elastic polymer strips to the Y-shaped metal frame, creating a U shape with the elastic stretched between the two prongs. Small leather pouch sat at the center of the elastic, perfectly positioned to hold a projectile. The entire assembly was maybe 30 centimeters tall and weighed less than a standard ration pack. Finn had spent the previous evening in the recycling processors, sorting through discarded materials until he found what he needed. Smooth, rounded pieces of metal debris, each one roughly spherical and aerodynamic. He had collected about 50 of them, testing each one for weight and balance. Now he sat on a stool, practicing his draw and aim. Pull back the pouch, settle the projectile, line up the target, and release. Over and over again. The motion was becoming smooth, natural, muscle memory building with each repetition. A group of students had gathered to watch, though their attention was less admiration and more morbid curiosity. "Is he actually going to test with that?" whispered a Yulari student. "I heard humans have unusual brain chemistry," another replied. "Perhaps this is some form of elaborate joke we do not understand. Or maybe he has given up and decided to fail in a memorable fashion," suggested a third. Finn ignored them, focused entirely on his practice. Pull, settle, aim, release. The motion was hypnotic, repetitive, precise. He had set up a small target across his workstation, just a piece of scrap metal with a circle drawn on it. His projectiles hit the circle with increasing consistency. Cal walked past, saw what Finn was doing, and stopped. He watched the human practice for a solid minute, his expression unreadable. "You are genuinely confident in this device," Cal said. It was not quite a question. "Yes, sir," Finn replied, not breaking his practice rhythm. "Simple mechanics. Elastic potential energy converted to kinetic energy. Humans figured this out before we invented written language. And you believe this will compete against plasma weapons and magnetic accelerators?" Finn finally stopped practicing and looked up at his instructor. "Sir, with respect, complicated does not always mean better. Sometimes the old ways work because they have had thousands of years to prove themselves." Cal grunted. "We shall see tomorrow. I hope you are right, human. I would hate to waste a promising student on stubborn pride." "Me too, sir," Finn agreed. That night, while other students made last-minute adjustments to their complex weapons, Finn simply cleaned his projectiles and checked the tension on his elastic one more time. Then he went to sleep, confident in what thousands of years of human history had already proven. Simple worked. Testing day arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made the air itself feel electric. The outdoor range stretched across half a kilometer of Station Helios 9's surface level, complete with target arrays, ballistic shields, and what Finn suspected were very expensive insurance policies. 200 students lined up along the observation deck, while Master Cal stood at the control podium, looking like someone who expected at least 3 students to accidentally shoot themselves before lunch. "The rules are simple," Cal announced, his voice amplified across the range. 3 stationary targets at 50, 100, and 150 meters. Hit all 3 and you qualify for the moving target test. Miss more than one, and you fail. Questions? Nobody had questions. Everyone had fear, but no questions. "Talex of Ular, you are first." The elegant alien glided forward with his plasma caster, which required a small hover platform just to transport it. He positioned himself at the firing line, activated the power core, and waited for the targeting system to calibrate. The weapon whined as it charged, building up energy like a storm about to break. The first shot vaporized the 50-meter target in a spectacular display of superheated plasma. The crowd murmured appreciatively. The second shot hit the 100-meter target, though the plasma dispersed slightly, leaving scorch marks around the impact point. The third shot at 150 meters went wide, the plasma bolt losing cohesion before reaching the target. 2 out of 3, Cal called out. You failed to advance. Next. Talix's face showed the kind of shock reserved for people who had never failed at anything in their lives. He glided away, muttering about recalibration needs and atmospheric interference. Brooke stepped up next, dragging his magnetic rail launcher like it owed him money. The Draxan warrior braced the weapon against his shoulder, took aim, and fired. The crack of the projectile breaking the sound barrier made several students jump. The 50-meter target exploded into fragments. The second shot required a lengthy recalibration period. Brock adjusted the magnetic coils, checked the barrel alignment, and fired again. The 100-meter target shattered. More recalibration. The process took nearly 5 minutes before he could engage the third target, which he hit with devastating force. 3 out of 3, but your reload time is unacceptable for combat scenarios, Cal noted. You advance, but barely. 5 more students tested with similar results. Energy weapons ran hot or depleted their power cores. Kinetic weapons required constant adjustment. One explosive projectile launcher malfunctioned and had to be carried away by the safety team while its creator contemplated their life choices. Then Cal called out the name that half the students had been waiting for. Finn of Earth. The laughter started before Finn even reached the firing line. He walked casually, carrying his tiny weapon in one hand and a pouch of projectiles in the other. The contrast between his simple device and the technological marvels that had preceded him was almost comedic. "This is a joke, yes?" asked a student from the observation deck. "It must be some human tradition we do not understand," another replied. Cal stared at Finn and his weapon with an expression that suggested he was questioning every decision that had led to this moment. "That is what you are testing with?" "Yes, sir," Finn said cheerfully. "I could confiscate it right now and save us all the embarrassment." "You could, sir, but you did say any ranged weapon using basic materials." Cal's jaw clenched. "Proceed. Hit your targets or accept your failure with dignity." Finn loaded a smooth metal sphere into the leather pouch, pulled back the elastic, and lined up his first shot. The motion was fluid, practiced, effortless. He released. The projectile flew through the air with a whistle and struck the 50-meter target dead center with a metallic clang that echoed across the range. The target's indicator light flashed red, signaling a kill shot. The laughter died instantly. Finn loaded his second projectile, adjusted for distance and wind, and fired. The 100-meter target rang like a bell as the sphere punched through its center. Complete silence now. Every eye was fixed on the human and his impossible toy. The third shot took 3 seconds to line up. Finn breathed steadily, calculated the drop, and released. The projectile arced through the air in a perfect parabola and struck the 150-meter target with enough force to knock it off its mounting. Cal stood frozen, his control tablet hanging limply in his hand. 3 out of 3, sir, Finn said quietly. "Do I advance to the moving target?" Cal's voice came out strangled. "Yes, you advance." The instructor reached for his personal equipment bag and pulled out his reconnaissance drone, a sleek piece of technology worth more than most students' entire tuition. It was fast, agile, and equipped with evasion protocols. "Hit this," Cal said, his voice challenging, almost desperate. "And I will personally recommend you for advanced placement." He launched the drone. It zipped across the range at speeds that made it nearly invisible, weaving random patterns designed to avoid targeting locks. Finn watched it for 10 seconds, learning its rhythm. Then he loaded a projectile, tracked the drone's path, led the shot by 3 meters, and released. The sphere caught the drone mid-flight. Sparks exploded. The drone spiraled downward, trailing smoke, hitting the ground in a shower of broken components and shattered dreams. Nobody breathed. Cal stared at his destroyed drone like a man watching his faith in advanced technology die in real time. "What?" he whispered. "Is that weapon called?" Finn smiled. "It is called a slingshot, sir. Human children play with them." The silence that followed the destruction of Cal's drone was the kind of quiet that usually precedes either an explosion or a religious revelation, possibly both. Cal walked slowly toward the wreckage of his reconnaissance drone, which was now smoking gently and making sad electronic whimpering sounds. He picked up a piece of shattered casing, turned it over in his hands, and looked back at Finn with an expression that combined horror, respect, and the dawning realization that he might have seriously underestimated an entire species. "That drone cost 40,000 credits, Cal said slowly. "I am very sorry about that, sir," Finn replied, though he did not sound particularly sorry. "It had military-grade evasion programming." "Yes, sir. I noticed the pattern variation in its flight path." "You hit it anyway." "Yes, sir." Cal looked down at the wreckage again, then back at the human holding what appeared to be a bent piece of metal and some elastic. "With a child's toy." "Well, when you put it that way, it does sound a bit ridiculous," Finn admitted. 3 more instructors had rushed over from the observation deck, tablets in hand, already running calculations. A female instructor named Vela from the Tactical Analysis Department was frantically swiping through data screens, her antenna twitching with agitation. "The efficiency ratio is absurd," Vela announced, her voice climbing an octave with each word. "Material cost versus kinetic output versus accuracy versus reload time. By every metric, this primitive device outperforms 70% of the weapons tested today." 70%? Brock interjected from the observation deck, sounding personally offended. "That is impossible. My rail launcher generates 3 times the force." "Your rail launcher also weighs 40 kilograms, requires 5 minutes of recalibration between shots, and needs a power core that depletes after 8 firings," Vela countered, without looking up. "The human's weapon weighs less than 1 kilogram, fires as fast as he can reload, and uses ammunition that costs literally nothing because it is debris." A Yulari instructor named Toril floated forward, examining the slingshot with the kind of intense scrutiny usually reserved for ancient artifacts. "May I?" he asked Finn. "Sure." Finn handed it over. Toril turned the weapon over in his delicate appendages, testing the elastic tension, examining the leather pouch, studying the metal frame. "This is embarrassingly elegant. The physics are so fundamental that we stopped teaching them at the university level 3 centuries ago. Elastic potential energy, basic trajectory calculation, elementary material stress analysis." "Sometimes the basics work best," Finn offered. "Sometimes?" Toril looked at him with something approaching awe. "Human, you have just demonstrated that a device requiring no power source, no complex materials, and no advanced training can compete with weapon systems that take years to master. Do you understand what this means?" Finn shrugged. "That simple is good?" "That humans are terrifying," Toril practically shouted. "You casually mentioned this is what your children play with. What do your actual warriors use?" The smile that spread across Finn's face was small, quiet, and absolutely chilling. You really do not want to know, sir. Actually, I very much do want to know, Cal interrupted, recovering from his shock. In fact, I demand to know. What weapons do humans consider advanced? Finn scratched his head, considering. Well, we have rifles that can hit targets from 3 kilometers away, explosive devices that can level city blocks, guided missiles that can strike targets halfway around a planet, aircraft that drop ordnance from altitudes you cannot see with bare eyes, naval vessels that launch projectiles the size of small vehicles. Oh, and we split atoms to create weapons that can end civilizations. But we mostly agreed to stop using those after we realized they were a bad idea. The instructors stared at him. You split atoms, Cal repeated flatly. For weapons, Vela added, her voice faint. But decided it was too much, Toril finished, sounding like he was having trouble processing the concept. Yeah, the whole mutually assured destruction thing got old pretty fast, Finn explained. Turns out when everyone has planet-ending weapons, nobody wants to use them because then everyone dies. Basic game theory. Commander Vex arrived at that moment, having monitored the tests from the command center. His 4 eyes swept over the destroyed drone, the data readouts, and finally settled on Finn and his humble slingshot. I have been reviewing the test results, Vex said calmly. Finn of Earth, you have achieved the highest efficiency rating in the 15-year history of this course. Congratulations. You are hereby fast-tracked to advanced weapons development. Thank you, sir, Finn said. Vex picked up the slingshot, examined it briefly, and handed it back. I am also recommending to the High Council that humans be marked as Priority Alliance members. A species that gives its children weapons this effective and considers them toys is either the best possible friend or the worst possible enemy. We prefer friends, sir, Finn assured him. Good, Vex replied. Because after today, I suspect the entire galaxy will prefer that as well. As the crowd dispersed, still muttering in shock and disbelief, Cal approached Finn one final time. The massive instructor looked down at the small human and his simple weapon. You knew this would happen, Cal said. It was not an accusation, just an observation. I had a pretty good idea, yes, sir. And you let everyone laugh at you anyway. Finn grinned. Underestimation is a tactical advantage, sir. You taught us that in the first lecture. Cal's expression finally cracked into something that might have been a smile. I am beginning to think humans paid far more attention than we gave them credit for. Well played, Finn of Earth. Well played indeed. As Finn walked back toward the Academy building, slingshot in hand and projectiles jangling in his pouch, he could hear the whispered conversations starting behind him. The word was already spreading through the station. Humans were not to be underestimated. Not now. Not ever. And somewhere in the administrative offices, a formal report was being filed with a single recommendation that would echo through galactic policy for generations to come. Keep humanity as an ally at all costs. Because if this was what they made for children, nobody wanted to face what they made for war.